The reign of the Emperor Wudi, 142 to 87 BC. At the peak of the Han dynasty, under the Emperor Wudi, the Chinese Empire stretches to its greatest expanse and seems to need for nothing. Even the valuable commodities which previously have been acquired from beyond the empire's northern boundary, horses and jade, are now regarded as home produce. They come from the steppes to the north of the Himalayas, where the nomadic Xiongnu are now increasingly brought under Chinese control. Sima Qian, writing during Wudi's reign, depicts the empire as proudly self-sufficient, in his list of what is available and in which regions. Wudi employs military force more effectively than his predecessors against the Xiongnu, who are constantly pressing from the north. Searching for allies against these ferocious neighbors, he is intrigued by reports that there are other nomadic tribes, the Yuki, enemies of the Xiongnu, living to the west of them. In 138 Wudi sends an envoy on a dangerous mission to make contact with these potential allies. The 13-year adventure of the envoy, Zhangqian, is one of the great early travel stories. See the journey of Zhangqian. It is also the first fully documented contact between China and the West, and a significant step towards the opening of the Silk Road. The contribution of the Han. Several important technical advances are made in China during the Han dynasty. In warfare, the Chinese skill in working bronze is applied to the invention of the crossbow. In the story of communication there are two major turning points. Paper is invented, with a traditional date of AD 105. And although true printing must wait a few more centuries, an initiative of AD 175 proves an important stepping stone towards the first printed texts in Chinese. Engraved texts, 2nd to 8th century AD. The Emperor of China commands, in AD 175, that the 6 main classics of Confucianism be carved in stone. His purpose is to preserve them for posterity in what is held to be authentic version of the text. But his enterprise has an unexpected result. Confucian scholars are eager to own these important texts. Now, instead of having them expensively written out, they can make their own copies. Simply by laying sheets of paper on the engraved slabs and rubbing all over with charcoal or graphite, they can take away a text in white letters on a black ground, a technique more familiar in recent centuries in the form of brass rubbing. Subsequent emperors engrave other texts, until quite an extensive white-on-black library can be acquired. It is a natural next step to carve the letters in a raised form, and in mirror writing, and then to apply ink to the surface of the letters. When this ink is transferred to paper, the letters appear in black, or in a color, against the white of the paper, much more pleasant to the eye than white on black. This process is printing. But it is the Buddhists, rather than the Confucians, who make the breakthrough. Western and Eastern Han, 206 BC, AD 221. For the first 200 years of the dynasty, the Han capital is in the Wei Valley, at Xi'an, the same site as Chang'an, the first capital of the Zhou dynasty. During a brief interlude the throne is seized by a usurper, who forms the Hsin or New Dynasty, AD 8 to 23. The imperial family then recovers the throne and moves the capital further east into the plains. The emperors re-establish themselves at Luoyang, again the very place to which the Zhou dynasty moved from Xi'an, nearly 8 centuries earlier. At Luoyang the Han survive for another 200 years, until eventually toppled in 221 after several decades of peasant uprisings, a pattern of events which has been common at the end of Chinese dynasties. Period of Disunion, 3rd to 6th century AD. The centuries after the collapse of the Han dynasty are a time of chaos. The Chinese standard histories identify no fewer than 10 dynasties and 19 separate kingdoms during this period. It is often known now as the 6 dynasties, from 6 in succession which had their capital at Nanjing, or more accurately as the period of disunion. As in many chaotic times, much is achieved. One such achievement is the flourishing of Chinese Buddhism. The first Buddhists have reached China, along the Silk Road, in the 1st century AD. They flourish partly because they are warmly welcomed by a well-established indigenous religion, Daoism. The Daoists see the Buddhists as kindred souls, and with good reason. Both religions have priests, monasteries, and some form of religious hierarchy. Both believe in a withdrawal from the everyday business of life. Both differ profoundly from the Chinese alternative to Daoism, the practical, common sense, worldly philosophy of Confucianism. Soon the two religions become so closely linked that a new Daoist theory evolves. The Buddha is actually Lao Tzu, who was given this other name when he made a secret journey to bring the truth to India. Centuries later, when Buddhism is favored above Daoism by Chinese rulers and when the great wealth of Buddhist monasteries provokes jealousy, the Daoist legend becomes neatly reversed. If the Buddhists are Daoists under another name, why should they enjoy any special treatment and such spectacular success? Such arguments underlie the eventual persecution of Buddhists, in the 9th century. Meanwhile their success is indeed astonishing. Buddhist carving in China stands as visible proof of their wealth and energy. In sheer quantity, if in nothing else, Buddhist carving in China would be a phenomenon in the history of sculpture. One site near the ancient capital of Luoyang, at the eastern end of the Silk Road, makes the point very effectively. Any visitor to Longmen will be struck by the profusion of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Arhats and their guardians. But exactly how many statues are there? In 1916 a local magistrate attempts to count them. He arrives at a total of 97,306 separate figures. A more recent study suggests that 142,289 may be nearer the mark. The Sui dynasty, 589 to 618. The man who reunites China in 589, forming the Sui dynasty, is an enthusiastic patron of Buddhism. He takes as his title Wen Ti, meaning the cultured emperor, and devotes much effort to building Buddhist stupas throughout the land. The local version of a stupa develops into a specifically Chinese form, that of the pagoda. His son, Yang Ti, the emblazoned emperor, undertakes an even more ambitious project, requiring so much forced labor that it contributes to the rapid end of this brief dynasty. But it has economic value and is a stupendous achievement. Yang Ti constructs the Grand Canal, linking the Yangtze to the Yellow River and thus to the twin capitals of Luoyang and Xi'an. The Tiang dynasty, 618 to 907. Rebellion breaks out against the second Sui emperor in 613, partly provoked by the burden of constructing his Grand Canal. In 616, fleeing from his capital at Xi'an, he and his court are towed down the canal to temporary safety in his specially designed barges. 2 years later he is assassinated by his own troops. Meanwhile one of the emperor's high officials has seized power in Xi'an. By 618 he is in a position to declare himself the founder of a new dynasty, the Tiang. China enters its most dynamic era, a period rivaled only by the first 2 centuries of the Han dynasty. Chinese culture under the Tiang reaches new heights in ceramics and literature. The Chinese style influences Korea and Japan, and the 2 younger civilizations also give an increasingly warm welcome to Chinese Buddhism. Imperial control now extends once again from desert oases along the Silk Road in the northwest to parts of Manchuria in the northeast and to Vietnam in the south. Beyond China's borders to the west, the might of the emperor reaches further than at any previous time. Princes as far away as Bokhara and Samarkand recognize his sovereignty. Imperial science and a great map of China, 721 to 801. The extent of the imperial Chinese bureaucracy under the Tiang dynasty makes possible an unusually thorough scientific project, echoing, for a different purpose, the brave amateur experiment of Eratosthenes 1,000 years earlier. In 721 the emperor sets up 9 research stations, across a span of more than 2,000 miles, from Hu in the south to the Great Wall in the north. For 4 years each station measures the sun's shadow at noon on the summer and winter solstice. It is an elegant experiment in that no difficult synchronization is required. The shortest and longest shadows at each place are the correct answers, providing invaluable information for cartographers. A famous map of 801, a landmark in cartography, no doubt makes use of the 9 points of latitude scientifically established in the experiment of 721-5. It is a map of the Chinese world, produced for the Tiang Emperor by Chia Tan. Chia Tan's map is on an ambitious scale, measuring about 10 by 11 yards.